Ladies and gentlemen, Blue Death Production proudly presents.
Any travel outside the area last 14 days?
No.
All right. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Hey, good afternoon at AFL Central. Captain Perkins here, and with me is Lieutenant Blanian, our flight surgeon and public health emergency officer. We're going to talk to you today about some things we've been seeing about COVID, where we are, and then some areas where I need your continued diligence and adherence to policy in order to protect yourself and to protect us all. So, Doc, thanks for joining me today.
Yes, sir.
Let's just kind of walk through some of the. Let me start off here first, reading a little bit from a message that recently came out. So first, numerous studies have identified the spreading and contagious nature of COVID-19 is overdispersed and not spread evenly. Said another way, is a few individuals who account for a large portion of spreading, and some small events result in a large amount of this spreading. And it's not possible to identify these highly contagious individuals who may be asymptomatic and likely are asymptomatic. And the best way to avoid this clusters of COVID-19 is to avoid venues with prolonged contact, poor ventilation, and high density or crowding. And the majority of these events occur indoors, crowded indoor environments where many people congregate, sometimes over time. And that's resulting in that. Another statistic that's noted in this message is about 2/3 of the sailors that we have here show symptoms, but a full 35% don't when they have COVID. And that's really challenging for all of us. So we're going to talk about some best practices to help us to maintain. The guys here, we're showing you what the headquarters NAFEC daily screening station looks like. And that's my expectation for every tenant across the base. I know Doc's got one at medical, and he's got his folks standing by at the quarterdeck. And this is the expectation. You answer the questions every single day. You get your temperature checked before you come into a building, and that just avoids the potential asymptomatic spread. So we're tracking those things. So some other do's and don'ts. What are things that people should be doing every single day to keep this thing at bay?
Yes, sir. They're the items that we've talked about from day one. The instruction or the nav admin commented on the important stuff. It's mask wear, and that's particularly where we see a lot of spread. If we're having social gatherings, people often, they're behind closed doors, they're in a smaller setting, they're comfortable with the people they're sitting around, but that doesn't negate the risk of COVID. And so that's when masks get dropped, people get a little bit too close, and ultimately that's what's leading to a majority of these cases, really. The other thing that I've noticed over the past week or two is complacency with the screening questionnaire. This is designed to keep people with illness out of the workplace. Not everyone that comes through the door meeting these criteria or meeting one of these criteria on the screener has COVID. Most of them obviously do not, but we're not willing to roll the dice on that. And so if we have the manpower and the capability to say, hey, this sailor needs to stay out of work in an abundance of caution, that's the idea. Because if that person turns out to be COVID positive, we have a can of worms with opening up contact tracing and potentially wiping out an entire workspace or work unit.
Yeah, and that's happened. Happened once here a little while ago. It happened on another base too, where somebody came to work asymptomatic for a little while, potentially then got symptomatic, stayed at work for a couple days, developed COVID symptoms, was tested positive, and the contact tracing realized that they'd been at work for 5 or 6 days with symptoms, spreading it. And it resulted in infecting, or potentially putting about 12 other folks at risk at another installation. So we want to make sure we're not doing that. How do we put that roadblock in place? Is we get really diligent about doing the daily screening, and it's not just walking up and taking your temperature. It's going through each of the questions every single day. And if you are symptomatic, I cannot stress this enough. If you don't feel well, don't come to work. If you develop something that feels funny, what should you do?
Call your supervisor, stay home from work,
Yep.
And contact medical. So
And if you're at work, and after lunch you start feeling bad, you should go home.
yes.
I don't want you sticking around finishing out that work day. Let's get you out of that environment, and then we'll figure out what the right protocol is to handle that. So speaking of protocol, how about when folks are starting to feel better? I got that cold symptoms. I stayed home for a couple days, and I've been feeling great for 12 hours, so I'm going to head back into work. Is that what we want folks to do?
Closer. It's usually 24 hours, yes, sir. So there's usually a requirement for you to be asymptomatic or at least recovered in illness for a minimum of 24 hours without the assistance of medication before you can return to the workplace safely. That being said, if you have an illness that is less characteristic of COVID, maybe no fever, you're not short of breath, you don't have chest, so far is if it's something like the sniffles or allergies or an isolated sore throat with no real correlation to any COVID, we still aim for no symptoms and recovered for at least 24 hours before we think you can safely return to the workplace.
But the key in all that is not making that decision yourself. I really don't want folks sitting at home going, I feel great, I feel better, I'm going to come to work now. I would ask you get some medical advice and consultation so we're making an informed decision on that as we move forward.
Yes, sir.
And then speaking of potential flu shots, we did a great job getting most of the folks on the base here done. Thank you to your team for working us through that. But if you haven't had your flu shot, and those are available for you for active duty and other folks, how many we got left on the base?
We're over 90% complete. We
Okay.
have strike with some sailors not on site here that will need their flu shots if they can't get them up in the morning. But
Okay.
other than that, we're close. We're over 90%, which is meeting the mark. And we also have flu shots available for dependents as well on a walk-in basis in afternoons through the entire month of November. The goal is to have people vaccinated by November so that when the flu season, if it starts early, you have some protection. So as soon as possible and as soon as convenient for people that are eligible for care through the clinic, they can come get their flu shot.
Okay, super. And have we opened up the retirees yet? Do we have enough for that, or is that something that's going to come later?
We're addressing the wave with dependents first and seeing what kind of the demand is, but we have plenty of flu shots available. As soon as we get a good idea of tempo, we'll open it up freely to everyone.
Okay, so we'll keep you informed as the status as that moves along. Okay, so a couple of just other reminders. I talked about the daily screening form, the tenants and departments need to do. Just please keep that up. Also, individuals need to continue to do those things off base that we've asked. Avoid those areas. Don't go to those areas that are prohibited in the page 13 instruction for those of you wearing uniform. And for civilians and dependents, we ask you to adhere to that. And I captured all that in my most recent order, in AFAC order number 6. So please help us out by doing the best you can by avoiding those things that are prohibited for the military in those orders. And then you really watch as the weather turns and it gets a little bit cold and folks are starting to drive inside into congregated areas. Watch yourself in that. Those areas that are small, not a lot of ventilation, maybe the windows aren't open because the temperature's cooled. That's when the risk for transmission of these small airborne particles goes up. And so you want to be careful taking that activity in mind and how you do that. And lastly, if you're going on leave, there's a new policy that you have to provide a risk assessment sheet for leave. So work that through your chain of command. We're going to get a medically informed decision of how much risk you're exposing yourself to as part of your approval. And that's got to go up to your commanding officer. For me, if you work for the base, for your other chains of command, consult your chain on how they're going to do that. But that's a new part of the holiday leave plan that I need to make sure everyone's tracking. Okay, thanks for everyone's attention here. I appreciate everyone's diligence in complying with that. Doc, thanks for coming to us and giving us your expertise again. And NAFEC, stay strong. We're working our way through this.